I grew up in rural Nebraska, on a farm that had been in my family for generations. It was just me, my younger sister Abby, and our grandparents. Our parents had passed away in a car crash when I was 10, so we'd moved out to live with Grandpa and Grandma full-time after that. Life on the farm was routine, predictable. Wake up at 5, feed the animals, check the irrigation, rotate the fields. Honestly, I didn't mind it. There was something peaceful about it all. The smell of soil, the early morning mist, the way the wind rustled the corn like waves on a quiet lake. But the isolation, that's something you don't fully understand until you've lived it. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. The nearest town, a tiny place called Maplewood, was about a 25-minute drive, and the only law enforcement was one part-time sheriff who mostly dealt with speeding tickets and the occasional bar fight. That summer I was 17. Just old enough to take on more responsibility, and old enough to think I didn't need to be afraid of anything. It was mid-July, sweltering, and the days were long and exhausting. We were just a few weeks out from the corn harvest, which meant we were checking the irrigation daily, patching up storm-damaged fencing, and keeping a lookout for raccoons or deer that might get into the crops. That Thursday started like any other. Grandpa and I were up before sunrise, sipping burnt coffee and listening to the local AM weather. Grandma was already baking bread. Abby was still asleep upstairs. Around noon, Grandpa sent me out to the east field with a toolbox to fix a busted valve near the irrigation channel. I finished the job a little after 3 p.m., and I remember sitting on the tailgate of the truck, drinking a warm root beer, watching heat waves ripple over the corn. Then I saw something strange. A patch of corn a few hundred feet away, completely flattened. It didn't look like storm damage. It looked trampled. I didn't think much of it at the time. Figured maybe a deer had panicked and run through. But that night, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned deep orange, Grandpa told me to do the evening perimeter walk alone. He wasn't feeling well. It was the first time in weeks he'd missed it. I grabbed the flashlight and set off, starting at the south end and working my way east. The corn was tall, over my head, and thick enough that you couldn't see more than a few feet into it from the dirt path that ringed the field. It was dead quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists in places far from highways, far from civilization. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of gravel under my boots. When I reached the eastern edge of the field, the same area where I'd seen the flattened patch earlier, I noticed more damage. Several rows of corn stalks had been stomped flat, and the dirt had been disturbed, footprints. Boot prints, big ones, deeper than anything I could make. They led directly into the corn. I should have gone back, but I didn't. I followed the prints maybe 30 or 40 yards in, deeper and deeper into the rows. The corn muffled everything. It was like walking underwater. Then I saw it. A tent, old, stained, set up right there in the middle of the field. Hidden from the road, from the house, from everything. It was low to the ground, half collapsed, like it had been there for weeks. I stopped. My stomach turned. I knew that wasn't ours. No one had permission to be here. Outside the tent was a pile of empty food cans, cigarette butts, and an old backpack. Someone had been living here. I crouched down and peeked inside the tent. Inside was a filthy sleeping bag, a stack of torn magazines, and a camcorder. Not a phone or GoPro, but one of those old handheld camcorders with a flip-out screen. It was sitting on top of a spiral notebook filled with writing I couldn't read in the dim light. I picked it up. The battery light was flashing red, but when I pressed play, it still worked. There were only 2 videos saved. The first one was timestamped 3 nights ago. It was footage of someone walking through the corn at night, breathing hard, like they were being chased. The camera panned around quickly, like the person filming was paranoid. You could hear them whispering things like, stay low, he's still out here, he's still watching." The video ended abruptly with the sound of something snapping, maybe a twig, and the camera hitting the ground. The second video was shorter. It was filmed during the day. The camera sat on the floor of the tent, filming a shirtless man with matted hair and sunburned skin, rocking back and forth. He was muttering, mostly nonsense. But a few words were clear. He watches from the porch, keeps the girl inside, can't let him see me again. I nearly dropped the camcorder. I stood up fast, heart pounding, and sprinted back toward the path. I didn't stop until I was back at the house, drenched in sweat and shaking. I told Grandpa everything. He didn't say a word, just took the camcorder from my hands, set it on the table, and picked up the phone. He called the sheriff, who said he'd come by in the morning. We locked every door and window, and Grandpa kept his shotgun in his lap the whole night, staring out the front window. The sheriff showed up around 10 a.m. with one other deputy and a tracking dog. They went into the field, found the tent, followed the footprints down to the creek that ran behind our property. That's where the trail went cold. Turns out a man had escaped from a mental health facility 2 counties over a week earlier, had a long history of violence and delusions. He was last seen hitchhiking near our town. They think he was living in our cornfield, watching us, filming us for at least a few days, maybe longer. I don't know what his plan was, but I know this: he watched us from less than 300 feet away. He knew our routines, he knew where Abby slept, he knew when Grandpa walked the fields, and for days we had no idea. Back in 2011, I took a summer job in rural Pennsylvania working on a farm. It was one of those gigs you find on Craigslist: low pay, long hours, room and board included. At the time, I was 23, broke, and honestly just needed to get away from some stuff back home. I figured a few months of manual labor in the middle of nowhere would be a good reset. The farm was owned by an older couple, Tom and Marie. They were in their early 60s, no kids, no farmhands except for whoever they hired seasonally. The place was about 200 acres of rolling hills, soybean fields, and thick woods toward the back. The main farmhouse was old but solid, with a wraparound porch and creaky floorboards. Out behind it stood the barn, this huge, classic red barn that looked like something out of a children's book. The first time I saw it, I actually said, "Wow, it's like a postcard." Tom chuckled and said, "Yeah, just don't go digging around in it." I thought he was joking. My job was pretty standard stuff: feeding the animals, cleaning the pens, hauling equipment, checking fences. They had a few cows, some chickens, and one mean-ass rooster named Jimmy that had it out for everyone. Most of my work kept me outdoors, which I didn't mind. The place was quiet, peaceful. For the first week or so, it was the easiest job I'd ever had. But I started to notice a few odd things. The barn was huge, easily 3 stories tall, with a wide lower floor for hay and tools, and a second level with a loft. But Tom never went up there. He kept a heavy padlock on the loft door and told me flat out not to bother with it. I asked him once, "You storing something valuable up there?" He just looked at me and said, "No, just old junk and bad memories." It stuck with me. The way he said it, too serious. And I started paying closer attention. A few times while stacking hay or feeding the goats, I could have sworn I heard footsteps from above. Slow, deliberate, like someone was walking across the wooden beams overhead. The barn had this acoustics thing where you could hear a mouse sneeze on the other side, so the sound was unmistakable. I'd call out, "Tom, that you?" Silence, every time. One day, Marie told me she'd be in town for the afternoon and asked me to replace a broken hinge on the back stall. Tom was off running errands too, so I was completely alone on the property. After I fixed the hinge, I was coiling up some wire behind the barn when I noticed the padlock to the loft was hanging open. That wasn't right. I climbed the creaky steps and slowly pushed open the door. The second floor was dark, full of old furniture, boxes, and what looked like broken farming equipment. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Light spilled in from a small window on the far side, casting these weird, long shadows over everything. I wasn't looking for anything. Honestly, I just wanted to see why the door had been unlocked. But as I was poking around, I found a pile of burlap sacks in the corner. They were stacked neatly, like they'd been placed there deliberately. Some were stained dark, and there was a smell coming off them that hit me like a wall. Sweet and sickly, like rotting meat. I hesitated, then untied one. Inside were bones, small ones at first, chickens, maybe goats. But another sack had fur. Another had what looked like the back half of a raccoon, all of it rotted, dried, and stashed. Then I opened one more. Inside was a pair of baby shoes, pale pink, scuffed, covered in dust. I backed away fast, heart racing. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone up there. The air was dead still, but I swore I heard breathing. a faint, wheezy inhale from somewhere behind the boxes. I didn't wait to find out. I ran down the stairs so fast I almost fell, slammed the door shut behind me, and locked the padlock again. When Tom got back, I didn't know how to bring it up. I waited until after dinner, then finally said, "I think someone's been in the loft. I found the door unlocked." He didn't respond at first, just kept eating. Then he set his fork down slowly and said, "Whatever you think you saw up there, keep it to yourself. That barn's older than both of us. Some things are better left buried." I left the next morning, packed my bag before sunrise, took my last paycheck, and didn't say goodbye. Later, I did some digging. Turns out that property had a history. Before Tom bought it, there'd been another family living there, a couple with a daughter. The girl went missing sometime in the 1970s. Police ruled it an accident, said she wandered into the woods and probably got lost. But locals whispered about that barn, said the original owner was strange, a recluse. I don't know what I found up there. Maybe it was just a weird, gross hoarding situation. Maybe nothing criminal, but something about the way Tom reacted, how calm he was, tells me there was more to the story. And whatever it was, I want no part of it. About 10 years ago, I took a night shift security job through a temp agency. I was 26 between jobs and needed money fast. The agency didn't offer much info, just said it was rural property surveillance out near an agricultural facility. I didn't ask too many questions. I just needed the paycheck. They told me I'd be working alone overnight from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., guarding a decommissioned cattle farm on the outskirts of town. It had recently been purchased by a private investor, and until renovations began, they wanted someone there to prevent looting or vandalism. The place was a good 30 minutes from the nearest gas station, surrounded by wheat fields and scrub. It had a long gravel driveway, 2 barns, an empty stable, and a little trailer that had been converted into a security office. That's where I stayed during the shift. No internet, barely any cell reception. I didn't think it'd be too bad. Just me, a flashlight, and a radio. The first couple nights were quiet, boring even. I'd do a perimeter walk every hour or so, check that the padlocks were in place on the barns, log the time, then go back to the trailer and listen to late-night talk radio. The place was eerie, sure, but that kind of quiet, middle-of-nowhere silence has a way of numbing you. But by the 4th night, I started to feel like something was off. It began with the motion sensor lights. There were floodlights installed along the side of the main barn. They were old and unreliable, but they worked. They were hooked up to motion detectors, set to trigger if anything moved within 30 feet. Mostly they caught deer or raccoons wandering too close. But that night, they kept flicking on. Every 20 minutes or so, I'd look out the trailer window and see the floodlight blink on, then off, then on again, even though nothing was there. I went out with my flashlight a few times to check. Nothing, just dirt and silence. But something about it bothered me, like someone was testing the lights, getting close, then backing off, repeatedly. The next night, the chain on the stable door was unhooked. I knew I'd locked it. I double-check every entry before the shift starts. But there it was, swinging open in the breeze. I went inside, checked every stall. Nothing, just cobwebs and rusted equipment. I figured maybe the wind knocked it loose. I hooked it again, pulled hard to make sure it was secured. At 2:34 a.m., the lights on the barn came on again. This time I didn't just check from the window. I went out, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. I was half expecting to find a coyote or something. But when I turned the corner behind the barn, I found footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, not boots, not shoes. Human. Barefoot. They were fresh, and they weren't mine. They came from the field, then stopped behind the barn, right under the light, then went back the way they came, like someone had walked up, waited for the light to catch them, and then turned back into the dark. I radioed it in to the temp agency's line, but of course nobody picked up, just voicemail. I left a message, locked everything up again, and stayed alert for the rest of the shift. By the time the sun came up, I convinced myself it was just some local kid messing around. But the next night confirmed it wasn't just that. It was about 1:45 a.m. I was sitting in the trailer going over my logs when I heard something slam against the side of the trailer. Not a knock, a slam, like someone had thrown their entire weight against the wall. I jumped up and grabbed the flashlight. The window looked out onto the empty path between the trailer and the barn, but there was nothing there. Then I heard running, footsteps, fast and light, moving across the gravel. I flung the door open, heart pounding, and swept the area with the light. Again, no one. But the gravel was disturbed, like someone had just sprinted by. I stood out there for what felt like forever, my back to the trailer, slowly scanning the tree line and the field. My light caught movement just for a split second. A figure, low to the ground, maybe 50 yards away, crouching near the old irrigation pipe. Then it darted out of sight. At this point, I was done. I went back inside, locked the door, and pushed a filing cabinet in front of it. I spent the rest of the shift just sitting in the chair, flashlight in my lap, watching the trailer windows until daylight. The agency called me that afternoon. I told them everything. The lights, the stable door, the footprints, the slam against the trailer, all of it. The guy on the phone went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You did the right thing by logging it, but we've had similar complaints before. Nothing confirmed. Most of the other temps only last 2, maybe 3 shifts. You stayed 5. If you want out, we understand." I took the out. I never went back. I never even picked up my last check. A couple years later, I saw something in the news about that same farm. Apparently, when they started renovations, they found a makeshift shelter in the woods behind the back barn. It had a tarp roof, old food cans, and a pile of clothing. The sheriff's department said it was likely the work of a squatter, someone living off-grid, probably harmless. But I remember those bare footprints, the slamming, the running in the dark. I don't care what they say. That person was out there, watching every night I was on that property. And the worst part is, I think they knew I was watching them too.